Are you fascinated by the strange and mysterious in our world? Do you find yourself drawn to odd and unusual events or peculiar historical moments that aren't talked about in the history books?
Do you feel as though you have a connection to forces or specters unseen, or that you're not entirely alone in the woods when you go for a hike? Do you think there could be something more out there?
Well, strangers, do we have the podcast for you? I'm Christiana.
And I'm Bree.
Welcome to Something Strange, a podcast covering strange stories ranging from the supernatural, the paranormal, weird history, folklore, and more.
From cryptids to real-life historical figures, from hauntings to peculiar happenings, there's a story here for you. Tune on in the first and third Fridays of each month for our main episodes. But if you can't get enough, check out our mini episodes on the fourth Fridays of each month.
We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube. And for even more strange content, check us out on our socials: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok.
For now, strangers, it's time for us to part ways.
Remember to tune on in.
We'll be right here with Something Strange.
Research and recording of Canadian creepies happens on the shared land and traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. A key treaty governing this territory is the Dish with One Spoon Agreement. This treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee people binds them to share and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, settlers, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. We all share the responsibility of ensuring the dish is never empty, meaning we must take care of the land and the creatures we share it with.
Welcome, wanderers, to Journey Down the Crooked Path, a place where the stories are stranger, the shadows stretch longer, and the things that go bump in the night might just be listening. I'm Amanda Joy, your guide into the eerie, the forgotten, and the downright bizarre. Here, we step off the well-lit roads of Canadian creepies and venture into the murky corners of history, folklore, and the unexplained, where the whispers grow louder and the truth is never quite what it seems. So let's take a deep breath, watch your step, and whatever you do, don't look back. Once you start down the crooked path, you never know what might follow.
Canada has no shortage of hauntings, old houses, old towns, and old problems. You can throw a dart at a map, and it will most likely land on some place that is fabled to be haunted by someone or something. Now, we've already been through the Dague poltergeist on this podcast, which was its own little storm in Quebec, in a house with just a few people and months of strange and horrifying occurrences that led to actual deaths. But there's another case that is spoken about a lot when it comes to discussing hauntings in Canada. It's a bigger story with more moving parts, and I'm sure that you've heard of it before. Now, it does share some similarities with the Dague story. Both start with a young woman who ends up in the middle of a horrible situation. They seem to be the targets, or at least the activity is centering around them. Both take place in homes that were already dealing with problems before any of the strange events started, and both moved pretty quickly once those events began. And that's mostly where the overlap stops. The case we're heading into wasn't just a contained situation, and it wasn't a quiet one either. It spread through the whole town. So we're going to Amherst, Nova Scotia in 1878. Amherst looks ordinary at first. A small town close to the Bay of Fundy, about 40 miles from Moncton. People went to church, they kept to their routines, and they didn't expect much change from one week to the next. Nothing about the place suggested anything unusual. But in 1878, one house started to draw attention for reasons that no one could ignore. It was a regular cottage with a family doing their best to get through the year. And then things inside that house took a turn. Later on, these events earned the nickname the Great Amherst Mystery. Now, most of what people repeat about this case comes from a book written years later by Walter Hubbell. He was an actor who spent the better part of 1879 living in the Teed house, watching the family and taking notes on what he saw. He stayed from June through August, and that was pretty much long enough that he felt confident that he understood the place and the people in it. Hubbell, he wasn't very humble about his qualifications. He worked on stage, so he knew how performances created illusion. And he believed that that background gave him an advantage in this situation. If someone in the house was faking anything at all, he expected he would catch it. And that is the whole reason he went to Amherst in the first place. He opened his book with a line that he seems pretty proud of. Quote, "What I have written is truth and not fiction, and is very strange." The activity in this case centered around a 14-year-old girl named Esther Cox. She was living in the Teed house at the time. Her older sister Olive ran the place, and Olive's husband Daniel Teed, he owned the cottage and he worked long hours to keep everyone afloat. Their two boys, Willie and George, were 5 and 1 years old. Dan's brother John also lived there. So did Esther and Olive's brother William. The youngest adult in the house was their sister Jane, who was 22. Now, Esther, she kind of had a reputation for being what we'll call unpredictable. People said that her mood could swing pretty quickly, and she had a habit of eating pickles whenever she could get them, which personally I don't find particularly weird, but I like pickles, so maybe I'm part of that problem. She had also been particularly small as a baby. At 9 months, she weighed only 5 pounds. Her mother died when she was 3 weeks old, and her father remarried and moved to Maine. Esther stayed behind with her grandmother, who raised her. Under her grandmother's care, she grew into a girl who seemed older than her age and took things incredibly serious. An anonymous family acquaintance had given Hubbell a description that kind of gives you sense of how the people around her perceived her. They said that she was usually gentle, but she could dig her heels in when she wanted something. If she didn't feel like doing a task, she would shut down and stay that way until someone coaxed her out of it. They still called her a good girl and said that she always kept a solid reputation. The trouble really seemed to start on the afternoon of August 28, 1878. Esther went out with a young man named Bob McNeil. He worked under Dan Teed and had been around the house often enough that pretty much everyone knew him. Esther liked him. So when he asked her to go for a drive, she agreed. It was supposed to be a simple afternoon out of the house. Bob, he's not such a nice guy. He takes her out past town into this wooded stretch of road. He stops the buggy, pulls out a revolver, points at her, and tells her to get out. Now, Esther knows this is not a good situation, so she stays exactly where she is. He keeps the gun pointed at her and demands she gets out of the buggy once again, and she still refuses. Now, at this point, a wagon approaches from down the road. It's close enough that Bob can hear it coming, so he puts the gun away, climbs back into the seat properly, and turns the buggy around. When they reach the cottage, Esther is distraught and runs straight inside and cries herself to sleep. No one really bothered to ask her what happened. The family assumed that the two of them had had an argument. And even though they know Bob, they don't really care for him. So they're kind of glad that it doesn't seem like anything is going to go further between Esther and Bob, and they just drop the situation. For the next several days, Esther avoided the house. She stays with friends and she keeps her distance. When she finally comes back, she tries to kind of move forward and doesn't mention the situation again. She's doing her best to make it seem like she's okay and normal. As it turns out, Esther's family aren't the only people who don't care very much for Bob. The people in town also don't think much of him. They actually call him cruel, and there were some stories about him hurting animals purely for amusement. That's kind of psychopathic. After what happened with Esther, he left Amherst. Apparently, he was still alive the following year, but he never returns. On the night of September 4th, Esther and her sister Jane are getting ready to go to sleep. They share a bed in a small bedroom in the Teed cottage. As they settle in, Jane felt something move under her mattress. She thinks it's a mouse. So they lit a lamp, check the bed, they check the floor, and they don't find anything. They blow out the lamp, and they try to go back to sleep. Later that night, though, they hear a noise from under the bed. And this isn't the mattress this time. It's something coming from a cardboard box where they kept scraps of fabric. They pull out the box and look at it. Before they can even touch the lid, though, the entire box jumps straight up and landed on its side. Both of the girls obviously scream. So Dan comes in, and he listened to what they said happened, and he just brushes it off. He pushes the box back under the bed, and he goes back to sleep. The following evening, Esther isn't feeling too hot. She has a fever, and so she goes to bed early. Sometime after midnight, though, she sits up and starts yelling for Jane. "I'm dying," she cries out, "I'm dying." So Jane lights a lamp, and she sees that her sister's face is bright red. Her eyes are wide, and her entire body is just trembling. She calls for help. Dan and Olive come in, along with William and John. Olive tries to get Esther to lay back down, and as soon as she does, all of the color drains from Esther's face. Esther tells them that her body is swelling and she feels like she's going to burst. Her hands and feet are puffed up. Her skin was burning hot, even though she'd been freezing just a few minutes earlier. She's twisting around in her bed, almost as if she's trying to get away from the pain. Then a loud crack hits the room. It sounded like something heavy had slammed into the walls. 3 more sharp blows come from under the bed this time, and right after that, Esther just goes limp. Her swelling is gone, her breathing settles, and she falls asleep. The family stayed around just to make sure that she was alive, and then they go back to their own rooms. By the morning, Esther is up and moving around, but she's barely eating. No one has any explanation for what happened, so they don't really talk about it at all. But then, 4 nights later, it happens again. Esther's fever has come back. Her body is swelled up. She's screaming for help. This time, the bed sheets fly off the bed and land in the corner of the room. Jane faints over this. Olive and the others run in. Olive picks up the sheet and puts them back onto the girls. The sheet flies off again the moment she let it go. Before anyone could react, Esther's pillow shoots across the room and hits John in the face. He left the room immediately after that. The rest of the family sat on the edge of the bed, trying to keep the sheet in place. A series of loud knocks come from underneath the bed, and Esther's swelling eases, and she finally falls back asleep. The entire family agrees that it is very clear Esther needs a doctor. So Dan, he goes to speak with the local physician, Dr. Corrett. When Dan explains what's been happening, the doctor kind of laughs it off and says nothing like that would happen while he's in the house. He told them he'd stay until 1 a.m, just to prove his point. He arrives at 10 that night. Esther has already gone to bed. So he checks her pulse, he looks her over, and said that she has been through a severe shock. While he's talking, her pillow kind of slides sideways until only one corner is under her head. The doctor stares at it. A moment later, the pillow moves back into place on its own. So the doctor, he's like, did anybody else see that? And John's like, I did. In fact, if it does it again, I'm going to hold it into place. The pillow starts to shift for a second time, and John grabs it with both hands. It slides back under Esther's head like he wasn't even there, and his hair stands straight up on end. After this, there is a series of knocks on the underside of the bed. So the doctor got down on the floor and he checked the boards. Nothing there. So he walked around the room, and the knocking followed him, sounding like it was coming from the floor under his feet. After about a minute of this, the bed sheets fly off of Esther and land in the corner again. A scratching noise started from behind the headboard. Everybody looks up at the wall, and a message has been carved into the plaster in thick letters. Esther Cox, you are mine to kill. After this, for the next 3 weeks, things start to escalate. Esther was hit with everything in the house that was near her. Potatoes, bits of wood, anything that could be thrown basically. The banging went on for hours. The doctor prescribed morphine to calm her nerves. One night he stepped outside during a round of pounding and said it sounded like someone was on the roof hitting the shingles with a sledgehammer. One night in late September, during another round of knocking, Esther has a seizure. Her body went rigid and cold. While the family stood around her bed, she told them what happened with Bob McNeil. None of them had heard this story before. When she recovers, they repeat her words back to her, but she doesn't remember saying any of it, but she does admit that what she said was true. It's not long after this that Jane notices the knockings seem to answer them. If someone made a comment, a sound would come right after it. So Dan, he decides he's going to test this theory. He asked for one knock for each person in the room. The knocks came, one after another, hard enough to shake the house. Over the next few weeks, they worked out a way to communicate with whatever it was that was causing the noise. 1 knock for no, 3 for yes, and 2 if it didn't seem sure. As the weeks go on, people start showing up at the Teed cottage. Word had spread through Amherst and through the surrounding towns. And before long, the place turned into a stop-in spot for anyone who wanted to see what was happening. Crowds gathered outside, enough the police had to keep people moving along the road. At one point, a local reverend, he comes by one afternoon, and he's standing in the kitchen talking to the family. He notices a bucket of cold water on the table. Without anyone touching it, the water started to boil. Then another reverend visited later, and he sees the message on the wall for himself. He heard thumps coming from under Esther's bed. Now, he doesn't believe in ghosts, but he doesn't think Esther is faking anything either. He comes up with an explanation. He said that Esther was kind of like a human battery. In his view, whatever happened to her during the incident with Bob had jolted her system so badly that she was giving off some kind of electrical discharge. Now, he doesn't explain how this works, but he thought that it accounted for the loud cracks and the heat that she felt. Of course, none of that explains the message that was carved into the wall, or the flying objects across the room. But the family doesn't have anything better to go on. So Dan decides to move Esther and Jane into another room and see if maybe that would help. It didn't. On their first night in the new room, Esther said a voice whispered in her ear and told her that it was going to burn the house down.
You. Yeah, you. Still haunting the same old fast fashion? Time to dig up something better with Back from the Dead Goods, a Canadian small business where forgotten threads get a second life and sustainability meets spooky. This isn't just upcycled clothing, it's resurrected fashion with an eerie edge. Handpicked, reworked, and revived, every piece is as unique as a ghost story whispered at midnight. And because you're a part of the Canadian Creepies family, you get an exclusive deal. Use code Canadian Creepies at checkout for 10% off. Find them lurking on Instagram, Etsy, and Poshmark. Links are in the episode description. Give your wardrobe a second chance at life, if you dare. Looking for your next obsession? The Creators Collective Podcasts is your gateway to the dark, the chilling, and the downright fascinating. We're a community of independent podcasts with one goal: to share the best in true crime, paranormal tales, folklore, and unexplained mysteries. Whether you crave cold cases that won't stay closed, haunted histories that refuse to be forgotten, or stories that make you sleep with the lights on, there's a show waiting for you in the collective. And when you join us, you're not just listening to one podcast. You're stepping into a world of creators who love this stuff as much as you do. Check out the Creators Collective today. Follow the link in our show notes to discover your next favorite podcast. We'll be waiting for you. Let's take a moment during this break to talk about something that matters. Something that doesn't get to be background noise. The Anishinaabe-Moan word, Nikinagana, means we are all related, and we are. But relationship isn't just about words, it's about responsibility. Canadian author Naomi Klein once said, "It is not enough to say that we live on Indigenous land. We have to act as if we do." And one way to do that is by supporting Pay Your Rent, a grassroots mutual aid initiative that offers direct material support to Indigenous organizers across this land. It's not charity, it's rent. For those of us who aren't Indigenous to this place, it's a way to show up differently, to redistribute some of what's been taken. The Pay Your Rent Fund started as a one-time request for help in 2018 and grew into a nonprofit called Nikinagana. Your monthly or one-time donation can help provide food, hygiene supplies, housing support, and resources for Indigenous-led resistance and community care. So if you've ever said, "We're all related," ask yourself, are you being a good relative? Visit payyourrent.ca and find out more about how you can be part of something better. Now, back to this case.
So Jane, she tells the rest of the family, and they kind of brush it off. Dan said electricity couldn't set cottage on fire. Immediately after he said that, a lit match quite literally dropped from the ceiling onto the bed. Now, it didn't fall from a box or a crack in the boards. It appeared out of thin air. Jane rushes to put out the match. Over the next 10 minutes, 8 more lit matches fall across the room, and the family is scrambling to keep anything from catching fire. That's obviously not electricity. While all of this is going on, one of Esther's dresses rolled itself into a tight ball and just kind of rolls under the bed before it bursts into flames. They managed to put it out before it spread. A few days later, Olive saw smoke coming from the cellar, so she runs downstairs and she finds a barrel of wood shavings burning hard enough that the flames are reaching the ceiling. She throws water on it, but that doesn't really make any difference. So she and Esther run into the street for help. A man they don't know runs inside, grabs a floor mat, smothers the fire, and then he just leaves without giving his name. By the end of the month, people were coming from all over the Maritimes to see the activity for themselves. Some left convinced that it was a trick. Others thought Esther was somehow influencing people, what they saw and what they heard. But most walked away believing that the events were real. The activity continues until December, when Esther comes down with diphtheria. She was sick for about 2 weeks, and during that time, nothing happened. When she recovered, she went to Sackville, New Brunswick to stay with another sister for 2 weeks. Nothing happened there either, and nothing happened at the Teed house while she was gone either. When she returned to Amherst, the disturbances started again. Esther said that there were voices now speaking directly to her, though no one else could hear it. One winter night, while the family was sitting in the parlor, she suddenly stood up and pointed to the corner, saying that there was a ghost standing there, saying that she had to leave the house that night or it would be set on fire. Now, Dan has seen the fires break out in the house already, and he doesn't want to take the chance. So he asks the neighbor, John White, if he and his wife could take Esther in. They agree, and she moves in that very night. For the first few weeks, everything is pretty quiet. Then, while Esther is scrubbing the floors, the brush disappeared from her hand. She told Mrs. White, and the two of them searched the room with the daughter helping, but they didn't find anything. Just as they give up, the brush falls magically from the ceiling and grazes Esther's head. There are 6 calm weeks that follow this event. But then the fires begin to break out in the White's home as well. Mr. White doesn't want to risk losing his home, so he tells Esther that she can spend her days at the pub that he owns. But the activity follows her there as well. Patrons saw objects move, and one incident, a pocket knife belonging to the White's son, drove itself into Esther's back. When they removed it and handed it back to the boy, the knife once again flew across the room and goes straight into the same wound. Back in Amherst, the people are starting to lose their patience. The Teed cottage had nearly caught fire more than once, and the town was worried that one blaze could take out the entire street. The newspapers were even arguing about the situation. Some blamed trickery, others blamed the supernatural. The fire officials, though, said that Esther was setting the fires herself. One doctor even said that the whole thing would stop if someone would just beat her. Meanwhile, the disturbances at the pub keep escalating. One day, the oven door began opening and closing on its own. John tried to wedge it shut with an axe handle, but the door ripped off the hinges anyways and flew across the room with the handle still attached. That was the breaking point. John told Esther that she couldn't stay there any longer. She had nowhere else to go in Amherst, so Dan arranged for her to leave town again and stay with family in New Brunswick. When she arrives, a steady stream of men who called themselves investigators or scientific observers came to see her. When she arrived, there was a steady stream of men who called themselves investigators or scientific observers. They tried to communicate with whatever it was that was following her by asking questions and reciting the alphabet until a knock signaled the correct letter. Through this method, several presence make themselves known. The main presence identifies itself as Bob Nickel, a shoemaker. Others are Peter Cox, who says that he's related to Esther. Maggie Fisher, who said that she had gone to school with Esther. Maggie Fisher, Jane Nickel, and Eliza McNeil. For about 3 weeks, the activity begins to slow down, and then it completely stops. For 2 months, nothing unusual happened, so she takes that as a sign that things are over, and she returns to Amherst. But as soon as she came back, the disturbances started again, and this time, someone new was paying attention. The young actor named Walter Hubbell had heard about the case and had arrived in Amherst in the spring of 1879, planning to stay in the Teed house and see the activity for himself. He walked into the Teed dining room one day at 7 a.m, hung his umbrella in the corner, and sat down with Olive and Esther to explain how he planned to observe things. 5 minutes later, the umbrella shot across the room, and before anyone can react, a carving knife flew over Esther's head and landed at Walter's feet. He checked the kitchen for whoever threw it, but there was no one else there. So he steps into the parlor to kind of collect himself, and as soon as he sat down, his satchel flies across the room. A heavy chair drags itself across the floor and then slams into the one that he was sitting on. He nearly topples over. So Esther walks in, hands him a cup of coffee, and tells him that she doesn't think the ghost likes him. So Walter, he kind of keeps his distance. He wants to catch her faking something. One afternoon, he pretended to be napping on the sofa, hoping to see her throw a match or tap the wall, but instead, a paperweight flies at his head. It missed him, but Esther was nowhere near it. And this is the moment where he kind of stops looking for tricks. And the longer that he stays, the more he saw. Objects vanished and dropped from the ceiling, fires started without warning, furniture moved. He was hit with whatever the house had lying around. And he noticed the activity stopped on Sundays. He also noticed that Esther took the brunt of everything. So he starts to talk to the presence using the same knocking system that the family had been using. The knocks answered questions about the time on his watch and how many coins he had in his pocket. He asked where the spirits claimed to be. The knocks said that they lived on earth, that they had not seen God. They were not in heaven. They were in hell, and they had seen the devil. On June 28th, the house filled with the sound of a trumpet. The noise went on all day. That evening, a small silver trumpet fell from the ceiling. No one could recognize it, and Walter said that he planned to donate it to a museum someday, but nobody knows what actually happened to it after that. By midsummer, the activity is wearing everyone in the house down, so it's decided that Esther couldn't stay in the Teed house any longer once again. So Walter arranges a short speaking tour, hoping to show the public what he's seen. John White agrees to split the profits with him. Esther, of course, wasn't promised anything. As for the tour itself, well, it's a disaster. The ghost doesn't cooperate at all. The audience watched Esther stand on stage while Walter talked, and nothing happened. The crowd eventually turns on them. When they step outside, people throw stones and pieces of brick, and the tour ended that first night. Dan refuses to take Esther back into the house after this, so she goes and she stays at a friend. At first, things are calm, and then clothing goes missing and people start blaming her. Around the same time, she's working on a farm that's owned by Arthur Davidson. His barn burns down. When he confronts her, she says the ghost did it. He doesn't believe her, and he actually presses charges. Esther goes on trial, but she doesn't really have a defense, and so she is sentenced to 4 months in jail. The public pressure built fast. People who had seen the activity or read about it said that the punishment was absurd. So she served 1 month and was released early for good behavior. While she's in jail, though, nothing happens. There's no noises, no fires, no objects thrown. And when she walks out of prison, the activity never returns again. Instead, she left Amherst, married twice, had 2 children, and lived the rest of her life without any incident. She died in 1912 at the age of 52. It wasn't until years after Esther died that anyone offered any sort of explanation that didn't rely on ghosts or trickery. In 1919, a researcher named Walter Prince suggested that the activity might have come from Esther herself, although not on purpose. He believed that Bob's attempted assault had pushed her past what she could cope with, and that her mind split off a second state to handle it. In that state, she might have started fires or written on the wall without remembering any of it afterwards. Prince pointed out something that had stood out to him. Two of the spirits Esther named were Bob Nickel and Eliza McNeil. Both of those names are pretty close to Bob McNeil, the man who had attacked her. He thought that this wasn't a coincidence. He believed that her mind was trying to work through what happened the only way that it could. But that theory has a problem. Hundreds of people claimed that they saw things move on their own. If this only happened inside of Esther's head, then none of those events actually occurred. And the only person who ever wrote down these eyewitness accounts was Walter Hubbell. In the first edition of his book, he said plenty of people saw the activity, but he didn't quote them. He didn't name them. We only have his version of events. And Hubbell wasn't exactly a neutral observer. After the failed tour, it was clear that he saw a business opportunity. He sold tens of thousands of copies. He published 10 more editions, and Esther didn't see any of the money. Even if there were no ghosts, Esther was still dealing with real trauma. McNeil tried to assault her. John White put her on display. Hubbell made a career out of her story. Every version of the case was written by men who benefited from it. We don't have Esther's own account. We don't know what she went through, what she thought, or what she believed was happening to her. Her voice is the one thing missing from this entire account. The only person who lived through all of it is the one person that we never get to hear. In that sense, the thing haunting this story isn't a spirit in the Teat House. It's Esther herself. And the version of her we'll never fully know. Thanks for joining me on this eerie journey through Canada's darker corners. If you love this episode of Canadian Creepies, be sure to follow Valerie on Instagram and TikTok at Canadian Creepies. She's the one behind the socials, sharing behind-the-scenes stories, creepy photos, and sneak peeks of upcoming episodes. And if you're craving even more haunted history and twisted folklore, be sure to check out my other podcast, Down the Crooked Path. You can follow the show on Instagram and TikTok for even more haunted history, mythical madness, and spine-tingling storytelling. Come say hi, share your own creepy encounters, and help us keep the weird alive. Until next time, stay curious and stay creepy.